there is no way you can transmit intergenerational experiences with ideas. You transmit them with customs, interdicts, and habits. And so there is an evolutionary aspect to it. And in risk management, for example, there are things you do not do, you see. And so religion had that aspect, that functional aspect that cannot be replaced by other forms of taboos because it's harder to connect. That's the first one. The second one is most of these modernistic approaches to things, how we behave, read things literally. You got to remember one thing: intellectuals have always been wrong, about risky things, always. I mean, they're wrong, of course, about communism, they're wrong about this, they're wrong about the religion, they're wrong.
Taleb might seem rude or harsh, but he's actually blunt and honest.
Hi.
Hello, Mr. Taleb, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you. I'm very honored.
It's an honor to talk to a person, a guy that's been called the philosopher of the 21st century. Are you okay with that?
No, because I'm not a philosopher. I am, I'm not, I mean, like labels, I don't like labels. And so in my mind, I have actually an aphorism that explains it. In my mind, being someone that self-identifies with something, typically that person is a fraud. And that was created by leagues before. You identify with the problem you're currently working on. So I work on probability. So my profession is to work with probability. So I have technical skills in probability. I also have cultural skills in probability and try to work with that. And probability has a beautiful aspect that when COVID came, you can work with scientific papers and say, statistically, this is not converging or something, and then therefore your sample size doesn't fit the claim you're making, or you can use it. So everything is based on statistics and probability, everything with information based on that.
In your books, you're talking against taking decisions simply based on statistics.
Yes. Exactly. But there's an asymmetry. Sometimes you do take based on statistics. So there is a fundamental asymmetry. If you use it right, you know when not to use it. You see, like for example, if you're an expert on hammers, like a lot of people are telling me, well, you know what, not liking the Gaussian distribution is like saying I don't like hammers. No, I love hammers, and I can be an expert on hammers and use hammers for nails, but prefer not to use hammers for brain surgery. You see, you have to find, once you understand probability, you find where it applies and where it does not apply. And how the ancients had a sophisticated way to incorporate both probability and effect of an event.
And there's also popular wisdom. You're sometimes turning to popular wisdom, like the taxi driver. I'm turning more than often to my father. He's also very wise, but very popular, like a simple person that understands the way of the world. So what are you missing?
There's a reason for that, and we're going to get hopefully to religion. What happened is that whatever you learn at school, and that was not just my position, if you read the ancient skeptics, that what was they're skeptical against? Pseudo-experts, you see? So if you look at how we deal with uncertainty, we've survived hundreds of millions of years. So we got to have the right reactions. You see, that's exactly probabilistically. You had reactions. And sometimes without understanding why, because it's widened to us to have these reactions. So we must have a fitness to the risk environment through our intuition, through our paranoia, through our extreme risk aversion in some circumstances. And that mechanism is a mechanism that has been refined by of course, hundreds of millions of years, maybe. So it has more scientific significance than some paper written by psychologists telling you this move is logical, not logical, rational, not rational, acceptable, not acceptable. And therefore, all these psychologists, I call them idiots to their names, and hopefully you will You will. I don't know what term you would use in Romania to call these guys.
It's okay, idiots. Yes.
Yeah, idiots. I mean, they come in and then they do some experiment, and their experiments usually don't replicate half the time. And when they replicate only under some weird conditions, and then to tell you that, you know what, this is wrong. So
you're saying this is wrong, and you've been going through this in your books, telling that this is wrong. But on the other hand, the world's been changing so fast for the past 200 years that popular wisdom is not enough to go from point A to point B.
Not really, to the contrary. In fact, if you think that things have changed, and I tell you that the underlying structure of the world had changed maybe quantitatively, but not qualitatively. And then we know pretty much it's precisely for that reason that all these studies in psychology and all of that, they're like baby science, not even science. Economics, baby science. So to explain again, engineering, we understand engineering very well, okay? And I keep explaining the difference between an engineering framework and Antifragile, for example. If you bang on your computer, it breaks. And the attributes of engineering is that, for example, take a watch, okay? There's no partial watch. If something breaks, it stops. If the computer breaks, it stops. Whereas in nature, human body, we have things that a lot of auxiliary mechanism. It's a lot richer. And the complex system is based on interaction. So once you do more advanced mathematics than the ones used by the, let's call them idiots, okay? Then you realize from the more advanced mathematics that you effectively your grandmother or grandfather or great-grandfather or great-great-great-great-great-aunt were actually had the right, okay, decision-making framework. You see, and particularly for tail risks. If you use complex systems, okay, you understand that all these analogies don't really work, and a lot of the things we were living in, all these structures were designed not for humans, usually by top down. And then there's another attributes of complex systems, and which is why it clashes with the idea of an expert. Look at an ant colony. Was it designed by anyone? Or at least, is there a regulator? Is there okay, look at a flock of birds. These are spontaneous formations coming bottom up with some basins, and same thing for human society. So if you want to do science, do it the right way. And if you do it the right way, you realize a lot of things you don't know, and it brings you back to the ancients. Now, granted, there are mistakes we make today that are mistakes because the environment has changed, okay? But I would tell you that typically if you're making mistakes in an environment, say, like, for example, you go to a casino and you tend to make a mistake by assuming there's something called the gambling fallacy, by assuming that the sequence, you figured out the sequence. If you make a mistake in today's environment, like say the casino, it may be a mistake, all right? But overall, they're not costly.
Depends on how much money you're bringing to the table.
Typically, they're not costly because plus there is a correcting mechanism. Those who make these mistakes, if they're really mistakes, they exit the system. That's the last idea of skin in the game. So, and my point, the skin in the game is that if those who make decisions, okay, have a risk of exiting the gene pool, then you have a continuous recalibration of the system, and that's evolutionary. When it comes to religion, and this is why I have a problem with what people call scientific atheism and stuff like that. And you guys have tried it. You've had your Ceausescu years, and you've had communism, and you have things. And I'm now in a 12th century monastery built in 1157.
Why are you there?
It's a university is based here, and I feel comfortable in such structures. Anyway, so let me tell you what I take from religion. There is no way you can transmit intergenerational experiences with ideas. You transmit them with customs, interdicts, and habits. And so there is an evolutionary aspect to it. In risk management, for example, there are things you do not do, you see. And so religion had that aspect, that functional aspect that cannot be replaced by other forms of taboos because it's harder to connect. That's the first one. The second one is most of these modernistic approaches to things, how we behave, read things literally. So to give you an idea, something I think I address in Skin in the Game, I don't know my books very well because I don't read them. Okay, so I think in one of the books I address the problem as follows. You remember there was a tsunami in the South Pacific, Southeast Asia, in like 2004, 2005. I don't remember the details. Now, the people who were on a coast, who sleeps on a coast, were affected and died. Many of them died. Now there were tribes, ancestral tribes, who would never sleep on a coast. For some weird reason, they would only sleep on highland, and they say and the reason could be that their ancestors.
So you're saying that religion is a store of wisdom.
It's a Darwinistic idea. Those who have the right ideas survive, not necessarily because the idea is good, but because using it. Let me give you another example I use from Skin in the Game. It makes absolutely no logical possible sense, to subscribe to the kashrut of the Jewish kashrut, but it has, but once you get into it, it's beautiful. There's a lot of rules. And I myself try to subscribe by the Orthodox calendar, food-wise. So I follow it.
Okay. So you're fasting.
I fast on fast days.
Wednesday and Fridays.
Fridays, yeah, and on fast days, 40 days for 40 days here. But anyway, let's say, why is it that it's functional to follow a kashrut, Jewish kashrut? And our Orthodox kashrut has some other functional reasons.
Every religion has some sort of fast.
Exactly. So let's take the Jewish kashrut, They discovered that those who eat together, band together. So if you have to eat, with other Jewish people. So it creates networks of communities throughout the Mediterranean and Europe, where you can have trade. And I explain it with scaling. What's better, to meet 100 people once or one person 100 times?
Okay.
You see, this is where you start having a network of communities who know one another. Therefore, there's trust to conduct commerce.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it helped them build networks of commerce. So you go from a town to a new town. You have to eat. You have to go find the community where you eat, and then you do business, and they ask you where you come from. That's the first thing. And the second one, it allows them to concentrate, therefore to survive when there's a big attack on them. If they're dispersed, you attack them separately. Here, they eat together. So, for example, that's one benefit of religion. So the problem of treating religion as something, what I call epistemic, by saying, well, that story, it means you're taking the story literally. Science is literal and epistemic. Religion is episteic, belief-based, pistis, credo. Now, for example, what does the word credo mean in Romanian?
I believe, credo.
Not really. It means I trust.
I trust, okay.
If you see the credo, the credere, it means I trust. I trust to go with it. Now, when you go to the movie, and you're watching a movie with a thing and there's blood, it's tomato juice, whatever it is, or some synthetic product.
Yes.
You know it. But for the sake, of the movie, you believe the story.
Of course.
Because otherwise you're spoiling your afternoon by not believing. You're not going to stop the movie and say, I can't believe it. They're making fun of me. It's tomato juice. Yeah. Theater is organic and natural. Cinema is not, because you go too much into whenever, it's like painting. It used to be the details which you paint should be an expression of skills. How good you are at verisimilitude, at replicating something, and then you can get inventive. Now you just, you can have your dog wag
The L, yeah.
And then you can sell it. So there's no longer this signaling. So you take something to its complete natural. Let me tell you, particularly in an environment like the United States where people value freedom, you're going to have a lot of psychopaths.
Of course.
Use freedom as an excuse, and because even libertarianism, they start citing you. It's very simple. They have on their bookshelves Antifragile, my book, not understanding what Antifragile is about. They have Ayn Rand, and then they have Hayek. And when some guy was arguing, look, I told him, listen, open Hayek, and on this page, he explains to you the government are necessary for pandemics and wars. And natural catastrophes. We need government. That's a function of the government. Or an Antifragile, I say, I get better if I jump 1 meter, but I die if I jump 6 meters. So make sure you take all it's not making this, if you die, you're not anti-fragile. So, and then there is also one mechanism that you don't understand about the libertarianism, is that you have to avoid harming others. It's called the non-aggression principle.
So if you were to write Black Swan again, it would definitely have at least a big part of it covering the COVID.
No, it is already covered in the Black Swan. I would not add one sentence. Okay.
You wouldn't add?
Not a word.
Why?
Because it's already, in 2005, when I wrote it, I spoke to the great Benoit Mandelbrot, and then we told him, what do you think is very fat-tailed? And we mentioned pandemics. There was no studies of pandemics, but could figure it out. All you need is one thing, sometimes N of 1, to figure out that a single disease killed a third of the population of the Mediterranean and what's now Europe, okay? That number is sufficient to establish some properties. Later, with my collaborator, Pasquale Cirillo, we did the formal study for Nature Physics. And then, of course, that was exactly, we didn't need it, all right? But we did it, to be formal and play the game and be, and we did some techniques called extreme value theory. And basically, it's the biggest risk we have, pandemics.
But still, you're arguing that a pandemic like this, it's not a black swan, because we knew about it, that it would eventually come. Black swans, you don't expect them. So this is actually something we should have prepared for.
It's consistent with statistical properties, and I warned we should prepare for more than our ancestors. You see, for one central reason, is that we're more connected. When you asked me early on, you said the world is different, we're even more connected. So being paranoid today, your grandfather and grandmother are more right today than they were then. So the problem is that we have these idiots, and let me call them idiots because they are idiots. And the number of the people who drown in a swimming pool in the past is very representative of how many people will drown in a swimming pool in the future. It's very stable, because that's what I call mediocre statistics. That's where the bell curve works. And because if you drown in your swimming pool, I'm sure it won't happen to you because
I don't have a swimming pool, but it's okay.
Okay. But if someone is foolish enough to drown in her or his swimming pool, it doesn't cause a neighbor to drown in her or his swimming pool. But if I have COVID, I'll give it to the neighbor. So there's a multiplicative effect that doesn't exist with car accidents, all these sources of risk. It only exists for pandemics, all right? And we have only 72 in recorded history.
Exactly. So that brings me to my next question. You're arguing also that this kind of events also produce, by consequence, other events, and those might become the real black swans. So what should we expect from a pandemic like this in the next few years?
Destroy the bureaucratic establishment, to destroy the administrative bureaucratic establishment.
To destroy the bureaucratic establishment. That's a very, very bold statement. What do you mean by that?
I mean, like something like World Health Organization did more harm with the pandemic than help. In the beginning, they said there's no reason to wear masks. Well, you tell them, okay, what do we got to lose wearing a mask? I mean, we know pictures in history, people wearing masks, okay?
Of course.
And we've had lazarettos in history. So they were there because they're no skin in the game type bureaucrats. And to discredit them and favor localism, because the mayors of small towns, not have these intellectuals trying to mess with their lives, you see. You got to remember one thing, intellectuals have always been wrong, okay, about risky things, always. I mean, they're wrong, of course, about communism, they're wrong about this, they're wrong about the religion, they're wrong about...
Why do we go to school, Mr. Taleb? Why do we go to school? Why do we learn things?
Well, I mean, there are things you learn in school that are valuable, and they're classify them in class A. For example, if you're learning physics, the physics is fine, but what these assholes do is they tell you because a physicist is an expert at physics, an economist is an expert on economy. No, you see?
Yes.
Okay, because an expert, we should classify schools in two categories. Schools that are schools where you learn things. Okay, medicine is messy, but medicine is still, and medicine has a very, very, very strong connection to reality. Okay,
it's empirical at first. You need to know how to cut and sew and
it's micro also.
Okay.
I said it's much easier to macro BS and micro BS because you see the results. If you have an incompetent dentist, you will see it.
Yes.
If you have a competent mathematician, you will see it. If you have an incompetent epidemiologist, you won't see it.